July 28th, 2025, and it's just a little bit after 5:30 p.m. This is a public meeting of the school board of West Bend Joint School District Number 1. More than 24 hours prior to this meeting, notice of the time, place, date, and subject matter of this meeting was posted at the entrance doors of the Education Service Center and on the district website. It was also sent to the West Bend Community Memorial Library, the Daily News, WRYU, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and other media sources that have requested notice of our meetings. Superintendent Wimmer, could you confirm that this meeting was properly posted?
Yes, it was.
Great, thank you. Please rise and join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We recognize the quorum of our board. All 7 board members are present tonight. Next on our agenda is to consider approval of this agenda, which was circulated in advance. I would move to approve this agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Motion and second to approve the agenda. Any final discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. We have an approved agenda. We move then to our recognition tonight. We first recognize for state West Boys Track and Field, and I believe Aaron Felber, our West Athletic Director, is going to come to the podium and walk us through this recognition. Good evening.
Good evening. Happy summer, and thank you so much for having us tonight. I'm going to call up our head coach of our West Boys Track and Field team, Mike Herther, to talk about our West State qualifiers.
All right, boys, come on up. Yep, split up, put like 3 of you over
Yep.
there, 3 of you over there.
Gentlemen, it's actually easiest if you come right in front of the podium. We want to be sure that you get on camera. And in fact,
Beautiful.
absolutely.
Perfect.
So we're just going to ask, we have a nice individual who helps us record these meetings, and so she's going to give me the signal if we can't get all of you. Are we good? Fantastic. Gentlemen, you did great. Please, go ahead.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for letting us come here and always just come and sort of reflect. A lot of times during the season, you're kind of going through it and you're in the middle of it and you don't really get to go and look and take the time to really realize how special it is in a moment and to be able to come back, months later. It's middle of summer, which sometimes it's tough, but you really get to go and look at the group of kids that you had and how special it was with them. So just wanted to go and bring some recognition to some storybook stories that these kids had. So first, we had Joel Walter over there. Joel, wave to everyone. Joel's a senior. He did long jump, triple jump, everything for us, and great athlete. Sophomore year, got to go and watch his brother go and compete, and right then and there in the car ride home, he says, I'm going to go and make it to state. And 2 years of hard work, dedication, going through it. Always did whatever we wanted, sometimes too much because we always want to score points and win. But we really took a break and focused around him this year, and it was just great to see him go and get there. At sectionals, he had his 2 best jumps of his life. He had 43 feet in the triple jump that qualified him for state. At state, he maybe didn't jump as well, but to go out at the end at sectionals, nerve-wracking meet, could have been the end of his story, and he decided to go and continue it and get to state like he had worked hard for. But more than an athlete, just a great kid, so super proud of his accomplishment. And then the other members up here are our 4x8 relay team. We got Carter Hackman, Carter Wave, Grant, Carson Hammer, Grant Walter, Ethan Hackman, Matthew Krozowik, and Cade Wani. Sorry, Matt, I always murder it. It's always Matty K. But this 4x8 team, talk about it, just a different group. Across the board, freshmen, sophomore, 2 juniors, 2 seniors. More than just being a team, I look at this group as a family. Just the way they grew up with each other, worked with each other. I don't know if any of them came into the season saying this was going to be my event. We had people go from longer distances to work to get on the team. People who joined the team, we didn't know where they were going to fit. People make remarkable gains to finally get to it. And all of them kind of had to sacrifice their own maybe personal goals, and they came together to go and do something really special. They ended up running a 7:54 at the Myra meet in early May. what was at the time the second fastest in the state. They did well. They fought their way through regional sectionals, injuries. Got to state, finished 9th place with a 7:56. Probably wanted a little bit more, but can't be ashamed of that because more than that, they qualified for the national meet. So we want to just thank you guys for supporting us with that. And we were able to go out to Eugene, Oregon, go out to Hayward Field, what is a very historic place for track people. And probably one of the memories that will never be forgotten out of any of these kids that were able to experience that. So we are just super grateful of all the support that this community, this board, our administrators, our AD give to us to provide the opportunity to go and make them memories. So we want to thank you. And we also got a few people, some cards. So boys, if you'd like to deliver them cards to your people, just thank you for allowing us that opportunity to go there. So thank you again. I think we're good.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. And also thank you for the notes. We appreciate that too. Now we'd like to move to state recognition for East Boys Track and Field. And tonight we have a new face coming to the podium, Mackenzie Welnack. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You did.
And Mackenzie is our new East Athletic Director. So first of all, welcome. Why don't you introduce yourself a bit, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then let's proceed with the recognition.
Sure. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Mackenzie Welnack, the new East Athletic Director. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm really excited to be the new athletic director, coming from the teaching world, aspiring administrator one day, but very involved my entire life in athletics. So tonight, I'm very excited to introduce to you our East Boys track and field coach, Matt Lesperance.
Hello.
Good
My name
evening.
is Matthew. I am the head coach for West Bend East Boys, and I'm here today to recognize Reed White. For anyone who's familiar with track and field or not familiar, it's a numbers game. So track and field, it's how fast you can run, how high you can jump, how far you can jump, how far you can throw. And in my opinion, the only number that really matters for Reed is the number 4. So the reason I picked the number 4, it's not 4th place, it's not 4-minute mile, but it's 4 years. 4 years of discipline, 4 years of dedication, commitment to the program, to bettering himself. It's 4 years of warm-up drills, 4 years of workouts, cool downs, 4 years of ice baths, foam rolling, stretching, 4 years of being a good teammate, trying to balance his time between competition, practice, school, social life, relationships, family. And it all culminated when he qualified for the state meet. And I couldn't be more proud to be able to coach him for those 4 years in both cross country and in track. The wonderful thing is that the end, the last meet, state meet, he actually hit his PR, his personal record. So we ended on a high note. And once again, the only number that really mattered is the number 4. So again, I'm very, very proud of Reed, and I'm very excited to see what the future brings for him. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate the presentations, and thank you very much for coming tonight to allow us to recognize you. As I've said before, it's great to see the school in action in so many different ways and all of the accomplishments that you had. And thank you, coaches as well, and parents for supporting these fine individuals. And again, appreciate you coming tonight. So at this point, we are going to move forward with our meeting. We know that, first of all, this is a public meeting, and we wish you'd stay. But we also know that you may have other plans, especially on a hot summer July night. So we're not offended if you leave at this time, but we're going to proceed with our action. And thank you again, everyone, for coming. We really appreciate it. All right. While our folks are exiting, we'll take care of the next item of business, which is public participation. I don't have any public participation comment cards. I don't see any in the audience, so we'll just move forward then with our consent agenda. And I'll read that in one moment. All right. On our consent agenda tonight, we have the following items. Minutes of the July 14, 2025 regular board meeting. 5 contracts, no resignations or retirements. Grade 6 through 8 Math Imagine learning contract. We have the Mark G. Sellers Foundation grant acceptance and the annual at-risk plan. And I believe that's it for our consent agenda. I'm just double checking. That is it. Any questions on any items on the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'd move to approve this consent agenda. Is there a second? Thank you, Melanie. We have a motion and second to approve the consent agenda. Any final discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. We move now to reports. Our first report is a construction report, and Tim Harder, our Director of Facilities and Technology, is coming to the podium to present that item to us. Good evening.
Good evening, board members. As I said last time, I'd bring pictures, so I'm going to pull up a presentation today. Grab this real quick here. And update that. There we go. So, as you know, today was probably not the most enjoyable day to be on a construction job site. Construction is moving along as planned. And so as we look at here, depending upon when you stop in our buildings, if you're visiting as an inspector, or if you're a sub-trade, or somebody from the district who's visiting, you'll see a variety of changes. And we're at that point in construction where we went first through the initial pause of, hey, we did all this demolition and the bathroom looked like the picture up on the screen. And then all of a sudden you come back like I did this weekend and stopped in, and all of a sudden you got walls and drywall. And so things are moving along really well. So as we look at things, this is the inside of McLean Elementary. And if you're not familiar, this is looking basically through the old office that existed 3-4 years ago, right when you walk in the front door to the right, all the way through the first classroom that existed at that point in time. Within a week and a half, the bottom right-hand picture is there, and all the framing and door hardware is in to start putting up drywall here shortly in the future. So as you look for McLean updates here, we have the secure entrance, the main office, and the nurses' space in that area. We'll start drywall insulation this week after inspection. Our in-wall electricity, security rough-ins, wiring rough-ins will be done this week, so they can start that process. Below floor plumbing cutouts have been infilled. So as we cut out certain portions of bathrooms, piping, the lower level bathrooms that are getting remodeled for ADA accessibility issues, those are all being infilled with concrete, and then the floors will be prepped to receive tile or epoxy or whatever that floor covering will be. Inside of the building, because, and I'm going to talk about on the next slide, we are putting all new windows in that building. You are seeing some interior soffit work that is being done, and I'll talk a little bit about that more, but it's basically pulling away the ceiling from the wall about 2 feet in certain sections so that you can utilize the whole length of the window, and I have some photos that'll show what that looks like. As part of our work, we have HVAC work that continues as part of the referendum and construction update in these areas that are being remodeled, but then we also paired that with our capital improvement projects. While our ceilings and walls and things are open, we have some of our own subcontractors who are doing work for us on site. And behind the scenes, prep work is happening for fire alarm upgrade and PA systems as we finalize that as we get towards the beginning of the school year. As we move forward, this is the outside of McLean, and so the upper right-hand corner there is the first step in this whole process. Is back in the early years of McLean at some point, like many school districts, covered up a good portion of their windows. So if you drove past McLean a month ago, this big round circle, which is above the gymnasium area, was just a piece of solid plywood or a piece of metal that was covering it at that point in time. They're in the process of taking out those coverings, and we'll start this week. Here you can see some of the intricate woodwork from back in the day. Unfortunately, it is not salvageable. It's got quite a bit of dry rot, as we so suspected. But then what you're seeing is, if you look at the bottom window there, the window in the middle is being taken out. So we are starting that process of pulling those windows out. And so when you see on the right or the left, those kind of tannish squares above the windows, those were the areas that were infilled in and you would get no light from your windows. As we move forward, the commitment was to go back to that original look of McLean. Those will be windows now all the way through those spaces at that point in time. So instead of having a 2 to 3 foot opening as a teacher in the classroom, you will now have that full height of your windows at that point. With that, we have to pull the ceiling away from the top of those windows so it doesn't abut up to it. And so when you're looking from the outside, you don't see the distance between the concrete floor and the roofing at that point in time. So what they will do is they'll go through the process of starting taking the windows out, temporary boarding them up to get ahead of schedule, and then next week the plan will be to start installing windows as they start to show up on site. McLean has a fair amount of windows to do that work through. Also the idea that you've got 2 floors there with some high windows around the gym area, so you almost have 3 floors at that point in time. So we want to get a head start on what that is. And then the priority of work being done is the areas that are classrooms that we start the beginning of the year. So there may be areas where we're still putting some windows in as the school year starts in terms of the gym and other spaces, but they're really prioritizing that space. So if you're to go over there today, they are starting actually on the east side of the building, which is the staff parking lot in terms of that. As we shift over to Green Tree has a lot more interior remodel work that you would have at that point in time from three sets of restrooms that are getting remodeled for ADA accessibility. You also have the bringing in of the early learning program. So there are 2 classrooms at McLean that have early learning space assigned to them. There are 4 classrooms plus a 5th space, plus some of the support staff that goes with it. So there's a little bit more remodel there and bringing our secure entrance to the outside of that building. So if you're familiar with that building, when you walk in, that bottom left-hand corner, that door you see to the left, which is now an office, used to be the main office and was all glass there at that point in time. And you can see how things progress and how fast they progress. The picture on the top was taken 3.5 weeks ago as they started to put in plumbing in the walls, and those are called carriers, which are those big heavy metal things that you put your sinks and your toilets on and your urinals, to having walls framed and actually having drywall up. So 95% of our work is done in wall and in floor. Build back of those walls are at 80%. We're finishing 1 restroom in the next week and a half. They are right on schedule for the work that's being done inside of the walls. Interior door frames have arrived, so you can see those in a couple of photos here as we go through that. You'll see those being installed. HVAC work also continues to be done. That building does have a air handling unit that will be replaced as part of the referendum project. That will come later in the year, and we knew that the lead time for that would not be ready for the start of the year. We will plan that out either over a Thanksgiving or a Christmas break. We'll keep the current system in operation at that point in time. And same thing as McLean, prep work for fire alarms and PA system is happening behind the scenes. As you go through, you can start to see kind of the progression of where we go. So you've got the bottom left-hand corner there is really what it looks like when you dig up that underground piping to redo a bathroom, to some of the framing and the drywall work that is happening. So the picture in the upper right and the picture in the middle left is 9 days apart. From time frame went up to electrical was completed to drywall and insulation was in. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, as part of moving our early learning program there, we added some in-classroom restroom facilities, so a toilet room for each of those classrooms. That's what you're seeing at that spot. And so that's where we're actually right on schedule, and even a little bit of schedule. You can see a piece of tape off of there. They're already at the point where it's been drywalled, the door frame is in, and they're actually prepping the floor for tile work and the wall for tile work. Hopefully, cross our fingers, they're starting that by the end of this week. As we look forward at Green Tree and McLean, continuing to start to see more outside work being done. So we'll start to take windows and doors out at Green Tree also in the next couple of weeks. And you'll start to see construction go to 6 days a week as we ramp up for the start of the school year at that point. Questions on Green Tree or McLean before I switch over to the last update? Chris?
I just got a quick one because you alluded to it, but school starts in 35 days.
Thanks for that number.
I know, 35
Appreciate that.
days.
Thanks.
I had to
Thanks.
count.
You must have been in my morning meeting today with Derek from Findorf. We were counting the days. Yep.
So you talked about, some stuff's going to bleed into the beginning of the school year, but I'm assuming that, there's no immediate concern for families. Everybody should feel safe going throughout the entire building. Everything should be.
Yep. So Derek and I actually spent some time together Thursday and Friday doing phasing plans for each of the buildings. There are areas that we don't need for the start of the year or with early learning not moving. For example, windows at McLean, the cafeteria, the gym, those spaces can be done later in the year while we're using different spaces and so forth. But the ability for our teaching staff to come back, get their rooms ready, old open houses, all of that, we are still on track with at this point in time. And we go through that almost daily to make sure we are not misidentifying an area or finding ways to accelerate certain areas to meet that time.
I just think it's good for us to share in our messaging too, so that way it tells our residents that we know what we're doing, right? And we are on schedule, and it can dispel any, concerns that they might have about the buildings.
The one thing that they will feel that impact is of that jump start for the kindergarten. Each kindergarten team kind of met, talked with Tim McLean, because of all the exterior windows that are being replaced. The entire site is a construction site and can't be opened in any way, shape, or form. So those teachers will just reach out with the principal to do a welcome, but they won't be in person there. And then Green Tree and their team met and worked with Tim around, and I think they've got an accessible part of their playground and all of that that's not deemed kind of in construction. So they'll do a kind of a different version of a meet and greet. So they will feel a little bit different, but still welcoming their families is on. There's something that they're in attention to.
Yeah, and many of the subcontractors and even Findorf, when we talk to them, the kids love to see the construction. When we started ahead of time, they love it. So there may be certain areas, I can think of a hallway at Green Tree we may not need right away. That isn't our priority based upon who's going in there. There are certain office spaces, there are certain classrooms. Same thing at McLean Elementary. There are just some spaces that don't have to be a day one thing, but we want to get everybody back in the building at that point in time.
Do you not imagine during the construction, right, when you start to open walls and things, sometimes there are surprises of various sizes. So
Never.
I guess summarizing it, and we've talked a bit about the schedule, but either from a schedule standpoint or from a budget standpoint, is there anything that we think is jeopardizing us from a budget, or we already talked a little bit
Not
about
at this
schedule?
point. Probably the most recent thing when you talk about opening up a wall, I'll share the top picture on the left. If you look, it looks like half of that door is open. So sometimes you find that the drawings from the 1960s don't match what was actually built. And so as that hallway goes through there and we opened up that wall in that space, we found out that the column that's here and the other one that's 6 feet over there was actually shifted 2 feet over. And so kind of hard to have a hallway with a column and to meet ADA guidelines. So we'll actually go through the process of adding 2 columns in on the side and then taking that one out. That one will push us close to the beginning of the year, whereas we get to open house, we might see that corner cordoned off or something like that. But in talking with Findorf, no major things at this point in time, as of today, and then as Chris reminded me, 35 days. So we don't do countdowns for that reason. We don't want to see them, but yes. So yes, you do find things. There are things that happen. We're using our allowances as we need to make those adjustments. The contractors, the subcontractors are really good about working on a Saturday or longer days to make sure we're on schedule. But I think, we talk with Findorf sometimes 5-10 times a day to make sure that we're solving all those little things to not hold anybody up.
And I think that's an important piece to mention. Those teams are working through the weekends. They know and appreciate the whole building being empty. They know they've got this finite period, so they've flipped into whole weekend teams. So when Tim's saying he stopped in on a Saturday, it's because there's active crews.
Yeah, they wanted to get drywall ahead so that the tapers and mutters can come in, all of those types of pieces as we go forward. All right, any questions on Green Tree and McLean? If not, I have a short update on Jackson also.
Go ahead.
All right, so typically we talk about Green Tree and Jackson because that's where we're currently in construction. We do as a team have a quick update when you talk about Jackson and the exterior design in it. So the previous design in the upper left-hand corner is what we have shared as a team and talked about. The bottom right-hand corner is an updated design. And the feedback that was incorporated was really looking for a more welcoming and less corporate feel to the front of that building to reflect that elementary environment, being an elementary school. The addition of that color that you can see the red in there, child-friendly outdoor elements such as benches and bike racks in the front start to make a change to the front of that building. We revised that exterior window partitions for an advanced visual interest instead of just that reflective piece of glass there. And then we started looking at some interior courtyard work and other things around the building. But this is kind of that updated look as we had continued to provide that team some feedback. A couple things that we're still waiting on in the next rendering as we come through. You look at the difference in how the bell was placed. Number one, we're going to bring that bell back to where it kind of was rendered last time. Maybe not that exact location up close to the building. We'll look at ways to put that back into the landscape and get it up on a higher pedestal. We will look at, Jackson has an original cupola that we'd like to look to see if we can utilize some of those design pieces as we go through. And then we'll share some further updates, but we did want to share with the board and others kind of where we're at in that process. That project does not stop, even though we talk heavily about Green Tree and McLean here every 2 weeks. That process actually takes up a ton of our time on the back end of also preparing for that as we go forward, but did want to share that update. We will continue to work on the outside of that building. We will also start looking at things with some of those designers around safety and security of other things that you don't see in the front as we talk about secure entrances on the outside, anything from landscaping to bollards, different placement of different types of things. But this gives you a difference in that look of the building at that point.
Right, any questions for Tim on the Jackson update?
Have we had any other, and Jen, I'm looking at you, have we had any other, how do I say this politely? Progress, expectations with the Village of Jackson, their planning, all that good stuff?
So, yeah, recall, for those maybe not familiar, we were requested by the village, I think sometime late June, to do a formal traffic study. The board approved a partner to do that study. They actually worked immediately. They were kind of waiting in the wings. Our team was ready for information that they needed, so they have delivered a first draft to us. Our team is reviewing that piece, and then we will turn that over to the village. I asked, are there any other expectations beyond this? They said no, that they would entertain that at a meeting. I asked if we needed to present, if our partner who prepared the study needed to present, and they said not at this time. So with that said, maybe there's detail once they see that too, that request might come, but there are no other outstanding requests at this time. Again, we're combing through the draft, and then we should be able to turn that around to both the board and the village relatively quickly so that we can keep the project on time as well.
Great.
Other questions, comments? We appreciate the update.
All right, have a good
Thank you. Our next report then is the superintendent's report. Superintendent Wimmer.
Jumping the gun on my next one.
If you'd like to give it from the podium, you may. All right.
So thanks for that segue to the village update. Just letting you know that that is on track. We'll review that draft. We'll get that in the hands of the village so that they can keep our project moving. Because again, they would not allow us to proceed until that was supplied. So we will get that going. Another piece of property in the news is the UW Washington County campus. So many years ago, I think 2 years ago, in fact, I was placed on a task force that analyzed its current use when it was UW. So that was in partnership with someone from UW Milwaukee, the county, all entities were a part of that and analyzing. And then they kind of made the decision to close. The wonderful news for our students and families are that that partnership has been expanded to Moraine Park Technical College. They are envisioning a true college campus. They will open their doors. UW will actually have a presence on campus. Our kids will have access to 4-way degrees as soon as fall of this coming year. They're also building a more robust vision of it being a college campus and inviting other partners so that our kids still have local pathways to whether it's a technical 2-year, 4-year degrees. So that's exciting news. Recall, you know, that as things change, we offer so many advanced placement courses, other pieces that prepare our students. Many are graduating with at least a year, if not more, under their belt towards a technical diploma or a college degree as well. So some of those classes are actually taught on our campus, and then some are in that partnership. So that's exciting that our kids, even though UW closed their doors there, they still have access down the street, if you will. But another piece of that, you see, just made the news that there is a secondary task force that is the what are we going to do with the property task force. So when that decision was made for closure, all county superintendents wrote a letter of interest in the property and a potential vision of what that could be. And here's a slice of the pie that public schools could use to have consolidated services, which would create benefit for our students, create some financial opportunity to save money for other other entities, those kinds of things, along with its potential for perhaps childcare, senior care, some of the county or community services, maybe some recreation spaces during the day, all those kind of pieces. So we set kind of this is what could be, and we'd love to have a seat at the table kind of letter 2 years ago. It's co-owned by both the city and the county. And every now and then they ask, like, what could that look like? So then there was a period where they were actually entertaining letters of interest on property. We submitted a letter of interest. Chris Reuter from Germantown, superintendent, and myself presented on behalf of the Washington County Superintendent. You'll recall headlines then, it was, they were also hearing a presentation from an outside of state charter school that they were looking at. I don't know that that became a viable long-term solution. I haven't heard anything from that. We did keep some of our pieces close to the vest because I was presenting right in front of what I would call a direct competitor, and we made that known in our presentation. So we did have that presentation. And then they offered the opportunity, members of the task force came and talked about, because I'd always talked about we can't be a fair market value tenant. So if you were looking at a market value of that, that could go anywhere from $6 to $9 per square foot in a space, depending on where you're at in the area, how utilities, different things are assessed. So they came back and said, well, we wouldn't expect that. What would that plan look like if you just took on utilities, if you wanted to create this opportunity? So superintendents met again and kind of refined a draft. We talked about a lot of programs that we have, specifically some of our student services programs that are here in the basement, no windows, no access, those kinds of things, moving them out first, taking advantage of that property. And then many of our neighbors are a lot smaller than we are. So having the ability to, as I said, consolidate services, offer seats to others who maybe don't have some of the programs, or if we consolidated, what could we work together on and maybe create other opportunities for kids while saving money for ourselves. So we talked about that in relationship with partners. We did resubmit a little bit of an expanded draft. I don't know where that is in review. My most recent communication, they sent me Thursday's agenda where they're entertaining an offer, and I believe that was in the news from a school. And then I asked, would you need us to come and present and expand on our plan or anything? And they said, no, we wouldn't be needed at this time. The committee's only looking at that new offer. So I just wanted to update the board kind of where that was. I don't know what the outcome will be, but I just asked that we get updated after that task force meeting to determine what, if any, next steps are. Any questions on that UWWC piece?
No, and just a comment that appreciates the ingenuity and the discussion of alternatives that would be of benefit.
Yeah, I think it would be
To many.
an amazing opportunity. I think sometimes people don't realize how collaborative our public schools in the county are. We really aren't in competition. We're highly collaborative with each other in designing and creating opportunities for kids. And if we do that together, we can generally expand opportunities while saving our district's money. So just be nice to look at. As we said, we just appreciate a seat at the table anytime there's an opportunity there. So I'll keep you informed. The next piece, Mr. Jenkins is the one who said it first, but back to school is right around the corner. We are urging all families to make sure they take care of their registration by August 8th. I can't shout that loud enough. Your biggest piece is your transportation. If you do not have the registration part, I'm not asking you to pay your fees right now. Do what you can on that piece. Make payment plans if you need to, but the attention to detail of the registration process, verifying addresses, doing those things, declaring if you need transportation is really critical. So we're going to be in August in a matter of moments, and if they don't receive that in a timely manner, the routes are established, and then it takes a while where you have to run the routes, try the routes, and then determine how a route can be shifted. So you're looking at a September, mid-September change. It's not something they can just kind of do overnight and create a whole new stop and rerun a route. So we're really reminding families and once you get close to that deadline and you haven't submitted your homework, we will start nagging you a little bit about it. So if you can get that in, we appreciate it. We welcomed some athletes here to celebrate kind of their end of season success, and fall sports is around the corner. I know it says fall, but they're going to start practicing immediately, if not already. So you're going to see kids actively practicing. Hopefully the weather cooperates. It's some of our hottest days, so everyone stay hydrated. But the first home game will be the East Suns football team on Friday, August 22nd, and we'll play against Waukesha North. It is also military night. So the team will honor the military with different special events, American flags for attendees, and lots more. So we would encourage our community to join us. If you need any information about athletics events, visit those websites for West Bend East or West, or even our middle school programs. But we encourage the community to come and participate and cheer on our students. So again, that first game is August 22nd. I can't believe we're almost in August. Speaking of getting ready for students, spread the word that we also have some job openings available, because again, we have 35 days, I hear, to fill these. There's classroom and special education aid positions that are open for quite a few schools in the district. It's a wonderful job for someone who wants maybe some flexible daytime hours. Our school calendar's a little locked up, but there's other pieces for coaching, building subs, nutrition services. There's a variety of opportunities. Those classroom positions are great if someone's thinking about going into teaching and wanted some exposure to classrooms. So take a look at our website and check out those opportunities. And with that, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Superintendent Wimmer on her report? All right. Hearing none, let's move to our discussion section of our agenda. And first on our discussion is book club consideration for two books, The Glass Castle and The Color of Purple.
Yes. So I'll ask Erin Faust to come on up. Don't be shy. She did a large majority of the work behind this, because in the presentation, you'll see linked a in-depth analysis of each text. So there's a couple copies over on the side there if anyone needs them, or you brought your copies with you, but I know board members were given copies of the book to read for themselves. So this I'm looking at is the wrong presentation that's up. Hang on. Good times. I'm going to get us started. And is Tim still here? No? I can't make Tim do this? Friends, what's the point? Yeah, I think someone has pulled up the wrong one out of board docs. I'm fine with that. Yeah, you have the wrong piece. That's the wrong one. We just have to go to board docs.
Oh, you just need to go into board docs, okay.
I just need the website. Well, isn't that fun? I'm going to get us started. So one of the pieces of the puzzle, for those of you familiar with the board or in our community, I think, well over a year ago, friends in the curriculum committee, we started having conversations around books, their content, and then we honed in every avenue. And those avenues were in, you can go right to the public one and find it. You don't even have to log in. Those were handled through curriculum, they were handled through policy, and they were general discussions with the full board to understand and create some filters. So those really centered around three pieces, around graphic violence, sexual content, and obscene language, which is kind of the swearing piece as well as vulgar language. So those were our three filters, if you will, on those book contents. Then we laid in as well what's age appropriate, right? So K-5, it's none of this is appropriate. And then there's some obscure terms like selected and limited in the next pieces, right? So we haven't really defined what those mean. So we have admittedly a little bit of a gray area in those. So what we've been doing for process is bringing those forward through our curriculum committee, vetting these books, and then understanding where they fall kind of in the filters and who has authority. So your curriculum committee in those filters, if everything meets those tests and there's no questions, they bring that forward and approve those books. And in the last conversation we had about books for Q1, we updated many of those pieces. However, there were 2 titles that we needed to have additional conversation on, which were The Glass Castle and The Color Purple. Originally, we had talked about also bringing forward The Ender's Game, but teachers are going through a curriculum review cycle, and they did not need that book to come forward for consideration at this time. So if you kind of followed the iterations of the conversation from curriculum to now, you'll see that way. So that's kind of where we are. I'm going to walk through then the pieces of the puzzle for each book, if we can. I can't see. Yeah, like, just advance me. So you'll see the definitions. These are our utilized definitions. Again, they were come up with through curriculum work, policy work, and book with the whole board. I know that the board has had the opportunity to see these as we go through this, but again, just to reiterate, our filters, if you will, are graphic violence, sexual content, and obscene language. Then again, talking about those grade bands, we talk about developmentally appropriate, kind of what those pieces are. And we've had some conversation, but we stopped shy of drawing any kind of lines in the sand, if you will. There's a difference between a freshman and a senior in what they're reading and what they're selecting, okay? So, but we had not advanced any other work. So at this time, we're still using these thresholds of elementary none, middle level limited, and secondary some. Again, without any more specifics around what limited and some mean. So with those definitions in mind, we reviewed the Glass Castle. Glass Castle came up really early in the process when the definitions and the filters and everything was really, really new. And we even, because it was confusing, we've done some work in the last year to tighten up understanding and apply the filters. So this is the first time they're asking for reconsideration of this text for their Honors English 1. And in there, when you look at, there's a specific unit of study. I'll remind the public as well as the board, these are book club books. These are not whole class selections. You'll see in your board memo, the other books that are in that unit of study, students are given a choice, and families, your parent or guardian, must sign off. They can sign off at the beginning of the year to give them full access to everything, or they can go unit by unit on that. And you'll recall we did some tightening up of what the permission slip looks like, because when we put NA, it was confusing for people. It just met the threshold. So we've cleaned up some pieces of that. But again, these are book club books that are selected and approved by families. So in that, The Glass Castle was selected. It's a memoir. I read this book and I said, interestingly enough, my father was born not far from this setting. They do a lot of their work in rural West Virginia. I'm like, oh, I know this place. Oh, I've been here. I've been there. So it was an interesting read. But again, you can see the purpose that the teachers are going for instructionally, how it makes a connection, and what they found valuable in the text. This is a true story of someone and her upbringing in a dysfunctional family is probably the nicest way to say that. Go ahead. So then we go through our filters. And on that bottom, the text evidence link takes you to exactly what those definitions are, what page is it, what's the sentence, so you can see the context, because so often context is everything. We've talked, the board has talked before about, is there redemptive value? Is it as if a court were saying, like, these are the facts and this is what happened? Is it perseverating or staying in really graphic descriptions, and the scene is, just chapters and chapters of something? What does that look like? So that context is very meaningful. When you look at the graphic violence, there certainly is things that are violent in the book. there's different pieces. The dad has a drinking problem and often becomes violent in the text, but nothing was deemed graphic. When I go through that, it's not persevering. It's like this happened and I got hurt, or this happened and that happened. But it wasn't centered around kind of gore or anything like that. But there are violent episodes in the book, again, centering around that dysfunction of the family. The next filter was around sexual content. And the examples in this book, again, when you look through some of the pieces we've used to analyze, what is the detail in there? Are they descriptive of certain acts? Are they, again, is it, I'm looking at a whole chapter and over, it's around this topic, but nothing, when we looked at it, and again, every single line in that category is listed for you, was explicit. So there, and again, excuse me while I talk about it, but frankly, there's no penetration, there's no bodily fluids, there's no perseverating on being sexually gratified by any of the violence or sexual acts that are there. But there are sexual abuse, inappropriate touching of a minor, attempted inappropriate touching, all of those people, really exposure to these young children to sexual situations at too young of an age. There's references to people using prostitution, but again, there's no specific kind of centering around that. So again, not explicit and not really overall. They're kind of events that happen in this person's life, but that is not the crux. The overall crux of this text is around the dysfunction of the family and her kind of redemption and moving through that and how their family is today. Any questions on those two parts? Okay. And the other, this is where kind of it gets a little more subjective for us. So there's obscene language, and I have those kind of your prevalent words that are used. The father, again, gets pretty crude, especially if he's been drinking in some of those episodes. But again, it's kind of sprinkled throughout the book. I highlighted, if you click that link, and go through all of these. I highlighted kind of those. I looked at the FCC and kind of some of those words that you'll hear a lot of these days on TV, if you will. But some of those kind of key that we would consider swear words. So I've highlighted those pieces. Just no judgment on whether I think these words are okay or not okay. Just these are the ones that rise to the top as what we would consider swear words as well. So when you look at, go ahead and analyze those pieces, it's around, so what's excessive when we're looking at language? When I looked at those highlighted words and we did word counts, there's 71 instances of those words. A lot is when dad's drunk and in a tirade, it'll be all like in one paragraph. And again, you can see that right on that link, and we are analyzing this text for use in honors English, which would be grade 9 honor student. And it kind of centers us around that. So really providing kind of the context of the usage, the intent of the teacher, and then in this one, they use that in small groups, but they do some peer editing. So we talked with the teacher around potential exposure to other classmates where maybe their family did not pick this text. What would that exposure be? And then we could make, instead of just general peer editing, try and get those students reading that to peer edit each other's, or then there's always the risk if kids are reading something they're just sharing with their friends or anyone overhearing a discussion in the classroom. So we just wanted to be real around what that potential exposure could be for kids in the classroom. So with that, it's really around, again, we did not see it falling into the graphic violence and sexual content as defined, but a centered conversation around, so is this excessive in its language or its content for the board so that we could consider it. So really the discussion is yours as a board.
Maybe we can just start with, it sounds like this perhaps has been used in the past. Is that
This
true?
was. So before the book club parameters were put in, this was a choice for students. At that time, it did not need or require a permission slip, again, before we put in those parameters, but it was a selected text, and there had never been any complaints or anyone bringing the title forward of concern that had read that.
No, and I appreciate that. And I think, so as just to understand the purpose for that question, it was not, well, this was grandfathered in. It was more so, I'm assuming we've learned lessons, and you talked about that there weren't, I guess what I'm also trying to figure out is, why is this included? There are so many texts to choose from. There must be something around the writing style, where this is adding value to the classroom.
So in this particular case, in this unit of study, the teacher is really introducing 7 different themes for students, and this is one selection that actually hits on all 7 themes. So when the kids have to write their essay on it, it's kind of a book rich with opportunity for kids to pull on and create their reflective writing piece. So it's the only book in that unit that kind of gives that breadth. And examples, it's a relatively, well, I mean, she's older than me, so kids might disagree with you, but it's a relatively new, and someone who's predominant in society, still an author, but it's a real example and a real story for students to read and connect with. And then, there's certainly themes that kids can connect with in their own life. So moving around a lot, or, any of those things, having someone with an alcohol problem, they can make connections in multiple different ways. Whether or not that is happening in their family, the teachers talked about, it's still good for kids to be exposed to a variety of different situations in lives. But that was the purpose for the selection. Also, Erin and I analyzed both AP classes as well as college level content. And you do see these titles taught. We could only find them at a couple. We isolated our search for UW systems, and you can find them at Madison Whitewater. You can find them at Madison College, which is a technical school. You can find both titles coming across those campuses. And then the next one, Color Purple, is on the AP approved list. So when you look at it, it's not out of the realm for a student who's kind of in that honors on that track, being exposed to higher level coursework, to have access or utilize these books. So they're kind of, I think, looking for that next layer of just higher level material for students who warrant it.
So just so we talk about process, excuse me, just talking about process in general. So if there's a book club title, and it universally meets all, in a good way, all of these criteria. There is nothing related to violence, right? That does not require parental permission. Is that true?
No, all books.
All books
in
do,
book
okay.
Club require permission.
Thank you.
Yep.
So
So
confirm
a
that.
family can choose to sign off in one blanket permission slip at the beginning of the year and say, allow my child full access, or restrict my child to these and be done. Or they might take it unit by unit, because at the start of each unit, they provide a slip that gives you what's the name of it, how are other entities kind of evaluating this book, and where are we seeing some of the content. So we provide that for families so that they can have that discussion at home and make that decision. So some are making it at the beginning of the year broadly. In either way, some make it unit by unit. But all of these books require permission.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And then if someone says, thank you for disclosing this, I understand what's in it, this is not the title for my child, they would have choice. Is that true?
Correct, yes. Yeah.
Open up for discussion. Any thoughts? Would we like to take this, maybe we'll take this title first through to conclusion?
Yeah. So again, when we analyze this, I would consider this being able to clear the filters of graphic violence and sexual content when read. The concern that we have is around, when you're looking at approximately 100,000 words, there's 71 instances of those words, and I'm dealing with the definition excessive. I don't know what excessive means to you. We have not said that yet.
Chad?
I would, well, I can't put a exact definition on excessive. I definitely think excessive is greater than 0.1%. So
we for sure ran all the decimals and ratios on everything today. I'm like, okay, this is point, yeah. We did the same thing because, and again, we just need to tighten up that last definition, I think, around obscene language, because you can see how wide we made the bucket for analysis, because I also don't have a list of like, George Carlin's, like, these are the 7 words. We don't have that either. So I think that's a really good next step for us to kind of pick up. So what are those words? Because then you can see where I highlighted some on that page prior and went, okay, if I'm going to focus on these, which kind of, like I said, broadcasting can look at and think, this is what profanity looks like. What are those? And then we did our counts. So we did it multiple ways. So again, when I have the threshold of it's not overly explicit in any of those domains, and some instances there are some of those pieces in there, I would say that we pass through that. It's, again, just making sure we're in tune with the board's expectation on obscene language.
I'll make a comment too.
Melanie?
So to me, I think 71 instances is excessive. Like when you look at it all listed out in a row, it's a lot of profanity. And I've never been a fan of that in the book clubs. And I think everybody knows where I stand on that. I just also think, we put in so much work into creating these policies and these thresholds and setting up the parameters around it. I don't want to start having like all these books coming forward that are exceeding that, where it's like, well, what about this one? Can we put this one in? Because then where do you draw the line? Like, well, that one was excessive, but this one's excessive too. Like, should we just let them all in? So for me, I'm not in support of adding this.
Well, and I think that you kind of draw that same point that we don't want to do that either. We have a lot of work to do in curriculum, and I would be reading books every single day for our teams on things. None of us want to do that, but the issue on this one is we have not fully defined what this means. I think we, as a piece of this, need to go back and do that work, just as we did with graphic violence and sexual content, and have a conversation a little bit further, and we can take that up right away in policy, as well as the next curriculum meeting, because they're meeting in the month of August for ours, and take it to those 2 teams, because again, as you just showed, everyone has different opinions, and we need to know where that is for the board and for everyone, so that we're acting within that. I think the other ones were kind of easier for us, but this is too vague. So,
Kelly?
Yeah, just to add, I think I still go back to if there's other options available. I like that you have the ability to choose something else. If you haven't read this book, you need to read this book. It's probably one of the best books I've ever read. So I'm a big proponent. I would be super sad to see something with this quality go. I understand that it could be uncomfortable. The whole book is uncomfortable, and I think it's written to make you uncomfortable and think about things. And she does a fantastic job of putting her life into that. But we did such great work at making a process of signing out of those that you don't want read, and it involves the family, and I think that's where I always go back to, that it's a choice of you can choose out of this and things like this.
Other thoughts, comments? Jan?
I just would agree that it's a choice book. If this were a required curriculum book, it'd be different. If there were no other choices that had NA across the board, I think it would be potentially different. The curriculum committee's job of trying to define excessive, or the board's job of trying to define excessive, it's clearly a subjective word, and that's always going to be the challenge. I mean, if excessive somehow is less than 0.1%, then that's something that needs to be discussed. But in this case, this book, it's nonfiction. It's written with the purpose of being true to the person's story. It sounds like in this case we've had the fortunate or unfortunate, it's been tested before, it's been out there. There's been, as far as no complaints about the book to date. Parents are involved in the decision, and it sounds like this would be a case where it'd be a shame to throw the baby out with the bathwater in this one. That's my thoughts on it. I mean, the story, I think, anytime you're doing a nonfiction story about someone with this kind of, and Kelly, you're probably better at you liking the book as much as you have, but this story's sort of resilience and redemptive arc, I think it's going to be hard to, not have it have a darker, undertone to show what comes through. I mean, the preface to the book is, the poem by Dylan Thomas. It says, "Dark is a way and light is a place," and I think that sort of defines how, this book goes. So that's my thoughts. Are as a choice book, this would be a good option.
I think when we talk about the excessive use of obscene language, there are two elements. I mean, one certainly could be the number. Although it's interesting, and I'm not saying this is a good thing, but there are a number of words here that I see on the internet just about every day and in most PG-13 movies. Now, that being said, I think the other element is that language being used in such a way that it's glorified, that it's teaching that it is a proper thing to use? And I don't sense that in this book.
No, that's a really good point. And there's another piece where, Aaron and I are counting and it's like, but that's one scene. Do you know what I mean? So to Melanie's point around, am I dealing with a book that's littered throughout and it's a way that's glorified and this is everything? Largely in this text, Dad, has issues with alcohol abuse and goes on tirades and rants, and those are scenes within the collection. And you can see that reference kind of in the page numbers or how some of those are clustered in there around that. So I think that's an important piece of context, but no, it is not. It's just, again, that's Dad largely in this text, in those moments, and again, more of his destructive nature on those pieces. So.
And I'm going to say the last thing I would say is it's an interesting dilemma because we have books that appear on college lists, and we talk about preparing folks for an academic future. At the same time, this is for a ninth grader, which is interesting. And I wonder if the tiebreaker is, well, that's where we need to be sure we have parental involvement in something like this. So
And
something
that
for
is-
contemplation.
That is forced in this. So if a parent chooses not to do the homework of turning in their permission slip, we automatically set it at 0. They don't get any of the rights. We act as if the parent filled it out for nothing. So if you don't turn that in, you're automatically set to that most minimal standard, so you don't have access without that. Because we have a few here and there where they didn't turn them in, but they automatically get set to having no access.
Other thoughts, comments? June?
I find it difficult to say a certain number of words is going to be based on the total number, a percentage. I would maybe steer away from that because as a family, your household may just say, if one word is in there, I'm out. And that's their absolute rule, which is fine. But in this situation, the father is a main character throughout the book. At the beginning with his kids get burnt, his daughter gets burned, all the way to when he dies at the end from his disease. And he has these bouts. So I could see why that number would be high, but my only thought is to not necessarily tie a percentage to the definition of excessive or excessive.
Well, and I think that's one piece. Like I said, that's maybe a next step. This is discussion only tonight, so the board can think about. I think that we have a clear path for some next steps with committees on that, but we do owe to the teachers to consider and take action on a future board meeting because they're requesting for Q1 as part of that unit of study. So I just want to get them that answer so that they can appropriately plan. So I think there's two pieces to the puzzle. There's the, yes, kind of as Melanie is saying, there's this one book, but this book appears to be a catalyst for us to further define some other pieces so we don't find ourselves constantly caught in this cycle. I think we could use that as a piece. I thought this was an interesting, if June's going to give away the end, then so am I.
Thanks, June.
For sure, June needed to have said spoiler alert on there, and for sure giving a spoiler alert. As someone who's taught English in my career as well, what's unusual to me about this text is that the family remains intact after in a place that becomes whole. So, yep, Dad passes away from his disease, and mom, with all her issues and all these pieces, they still are a family. They still honor their mother as part of their family. They work through some of those things. They've had issues, but sometimes in a book you see, it's that, and they walk away and, start new, or something just really gets decimated. And it's one, I think, to Chad's point about that redemptive value of around, I came through this the other side, and I found a way to forgive. I found a way to honor. I found a way to stay connected to my family, as a story that happens to be true. So I think that might set this book apart, like why it's probably widely applauded as a good book. But whether or not we add it in this unit is something for the board to kind of weigh on.
All right, so this is discussion only tonight for this first. So I guess the last thing I would say is, and others have said it too, the numerical count perhaps is instructive, but maybe not conclusory. If there was only one occurrence of obscene language, we would probably say, well, that doesn't sound excessive. If there were 10,000, we would say, that sounds excessive. But the question is, well, should that number be 50, 51, 73?
Yeah.
What is it?
I don't think you can answer that. I think the work that the curriculum committee and the team did over the course of the year to kind of reset how permission slips will look, so there's no false interpretation on what may or may not be included. So if, like, hey, we met this threshold, it doesn't give a false impression that there's nothing. It just tells you kind of where that is a little bit more. And we could say, profanity may be included, but it's not predominant, those kinds of things. So again, I'm comfortable bringing this forward to the board for action, and then using it as a springboard to really kind of examine with those two committees, where does this one lie then? What does this need to do? I think that is nice where we get on, like I said, so we don't get in that hamster wheel of kind of coming back and chasing book titles all the time. But if the board is okay, I'd like to, put this on a future agenda for you to formally take action. We can get teachers their answer for the year, and then we can use it as a springboard for process.
Sure, and I think we've said as throughout the whole construction, and thanks again to the curriculum committee for really moving this forward, and to administration, is this is work in progress. We're always going to refine it, and I'm sure we'll be refining it going forward. So this is the next step. And this is a good, this is a very good, solid question.
Yeah, and one of the pieces that the team's undertaking, all of 612 is going through their curriculum review cycle over the course of the year. The team started gathering already this summer. Everything is going to kind of shift and change when that process happens. So I don't think we're in kind of a long-term, like you said, can we evolve something? Absolutely. Am I stuck with this is all that's consuming us? No, I don't perceive that to be happening for us.
Thank you. Any objections, board members, to moving then to the next title?
The next book then is The Color Purple. So kind of following the same thing for The Color Purple. This is Honors English 2, so this is kind of 10th grade. Honors level students. You can see again, and people may be familiar with having read this themselves or seen the movie, but it's set in kind of rural South during a time when kind of oppression of women, of people of color, people living in poverty, all of those pieces are part of this puzzle of this text. In this, they read that novel outside of class, and then they gather in discussion. The unit is focusing on characterization, plot development, different conflicts and larger themes. And then again, ownership of potential exposure if kids are talking outside of those groups with others around what they read or showing their book, or people overhear that could absolutely occur. This represents another book that we would require parent guardian permission for. This is a text that is on the advanced placement course guide. So it does appear with that. That's a nationally curated list, and those pieces, we choose not to read it. So our kids aren't penalized for not having read it. We're pulling from other pieces of that list, but it does sit in that AP list, so you'll see this one maybe a little bit more prevalent in high schools or colleges, if you will. Going through that one, same process, right? We have our 3 filters: graphic violence, sexual content, obscene language. In this text, it's a little bit more prevalent, those themes, across this book. So I think I'll unpack these one at a time for you. In that filter of graphic violence, when you read through those pieces, they are complex, just abhorrent violence of rape, sexual assault, physical beating, all of these pieces. However, oftentimes that text, and again, you can click on the link, you can see that or see some of the scanned passages, they're matter of fact. There's a piece where a character gets into a confrontation and then they split her lip, then they busted her skull, then they did this, they broke her ribs, they did, and it's kind of matter of fact. It's not perseverating, if you will, on blood, gore, and lingering in those scenes. It was just this occurred for many of those pieces. So it's really kind of, where is that line? We certainly have some graphic violence in texts about war and kind of those pieces, and that's where our conversation as a board had centered before, like how prevalent is that? So there is certainly violence in there. It gets a little subjective around what's graphic. Is graphic that it was, kind of beating your spouse, or is it, for us, graphic really centered around how it sat in the scene, how long that was a piece, and how it was reported. Like they busted her skull and her brains were laying on the pavement. No, that's not what this text says. At all. So there's that piece. Any questions around the graphic violence content in this text? Or any pieces that just sat where, we have to re-examine that filter?
I don't know if you have to necessarily re-examine the filter. I mean, you think it caught it. I think what's a bit profound is the number of times. But once again, we just talked about number and whether that's indicative or not. But
so the next piece, I think that is probably around any of our books a little more explicit, is the sexual content in this text. So if you look at, again, clicking on that text evidence, you can see the specifics, but there is sexual abuse, as we said prior, rape, sexual assault, all of those pieces, and certainly violence, sexual violence, as well as kind of in that racism avenue, different brutality, lynchings are referenced in here as part of that graphic violence piece. So there's just is more, while not very explicit, again, there's they're not centering around a very lingering scene of the actual physical act of sex itself. It is in there, and it is a little bit more than the book that we just looked at. So it is a little bit different in the sexual content. I know that we analyzed this text in depth around in policy as well as a board when we were kind of refining the filters, and we're putting that through. So any discussion for the board on the sexual content that is in this text?
To me, I would think that that would be excessive, this one, and the sexual content. So I don't know how you draw that line, right? But definitely seems excessive to me.
And again, this is text that we visited when we were trying to refine this definition as well. No, it had not. It had been utilized prior to, again, book clubs in some ways, but it had not.
what I'll also just say is, I think when we set these parameters, the idea was the ones that should come to this board were the ones that were, for lack of a better term, edgy, as opposed to, wow, look at this, we have set these parameters, we're getting way too many books that are really benign, or the other way around. And so in some ways, I think this is working. I think there's more refinement yet to come, but.
I think June had.
Oh, June, I'm sorry, I missed that. June,
I was
please
just
go
going to
ahead.
say, it's just heavy content, but it's factually accurate. So I would, it just hits you harder, and, but it's not incorrect. So Definitely an interesting read.
And again, too, the board might want to weigh a piece of this puzzle is where's the exposure of this book? Again, prior, we talked about kind of the difference between a 9th and 10th grader and an 11th and 12th. In this case, we're talking about 10th grade honor students on that. So I just want to keep that because maybe that's a piece of our puzzle future forward too.
Right, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, I'm sure, like, it's a great story, like, it's a classic, or, it's a good one, but it's just, is it age appropriate for where we're putting it? I don't know, that I don't know.
Can you touch on that? So, hypothetically, if we said as a board, you know what, we're not sure if this is okay for 10th grade, but maybe we recommend for a higher grade level. Do they take that feedback back and reassess, or what does that
Yeah,
look
so
like?
they could consider it. This would fall probably the AP class where it's sitting on a list. I would recommend that they look at potential use. That request did not come from that team, so I don't know if that's something they're looking at. I would say that they would use that feedback as they analyze curriculum. But yeah, it's certainly something we could say, you know what, this made us uncomfortable. We're going to go back to process. We're going to do these pieces, but it could be a no at this time. It could be a no. And this, it was, like I said, this one, it was just a little bit, I think, harder to kind of tease out, what's the real question? Was it the content? Is it the age? Is it kind of those pieces? Is it some of everything? If there's nothing more on sexual content, the same issue we had before around obscene language. I think we, again, bring that forward through our two committees, both policy and curriculum, because we'll look at it through two lenses, and we can get that scheduled. But same thing where there's kind of frequency of strong language, highlighted some of those, a little bit less than the prior book, but again, looking at, so where is this? So if we're saying, there's some violence occurring. It's kind of centered around or sitting in the graphic lane long. There's a lot of sexual content in there, but it's, again, not overly descriptive. It's not put it in there for sexual gratification of the reader. It's not put in any way, shape, or form like that. What does that look like? And then looking at what is some of that language that's being used. So, and just giving you the context of that book too. Any pieces on obscene language? Like I said, I think there's a little bit more work to do on that. This text usually, really certainly, again, given the text, it uses the N-word quite a bit in it, and it's kind of spelled out in there, in addition to some generalized profanity. So kind of looking at all those pieces of the puzzle. Any questions about some of the language you saw in there, or pieces, or?
I think we talked about it before, and there's discussion about, it's kind of a snapshot in history a bit, and it's put in context, not to say that it makes it wrong or right, but that does put a little bit of a different spin on it, that if instead it was around glamorizing it or promoting it.
Right. Yeah, so it's, again, looking at those pieces. I think for this one, it's a little bit less maybe around that language and around just knowing where's that line kind of on the sexual content. Because I said it's a little bit more descriptive, certainly not explicit, but it is there, and that's something that the board should weigh. I'm comfortable with the approach, same as the other, where you kind of think about, if you have questions now, but putting this on a future agenda and just taking definitive action on this one, and the board might just not have enough to answer that one, but at least I would urge you, just call the question so that we can get the teachers the answer. And then I think the directive that we're taking back to the two teams is we need to go through the iteration on obscene languages piece and bring that back through those different channels, and then kind of revisit everything as a whole. But at least kind of, like I said, I would recommend that you at least bring this forward. Unless right now everyone's like, well, this, you don't want to even have a discussion again. But I think you should have the discussion, declare what you want for fall, and then we've got our next steps.
Right. No, I think that's appropriate, just to give certainty, at least for this year or the school year, right? even if we said no, we can come back
Correct.
and analyze it further. If we
Yeah.
say yes, we can come back and analyze policy further.
Yeah, so I think no matter what, and those outcomes on these texts, I think we've exposed some pieces that need work for both committees to take up and do. So we'll do that and schedule that right away this summer before we start the year. But again, for these two texts that are being requested for quarter one, I think, and then it's for the board around, is this something that you feel comfortable as Chris and I plan future agendas, kind of given all the information that you've had to soak in and kind of some of the questions and discussions tonight? Is this something you feel comfortable that we put on for an action item on a next agenda? Do you want to dig into any more pieces of this puzzle? Again, we certainly know we have work to do in those committees, but for the sake of these two texts, I guess we would both be asking for some direction from the board.
Sure. So I guess are there any objections, board members, to having this placed on the next agenda for action item either to approve or to not approve? Any objections to the next agenda?
Great. Then
Hearing
what I'll-
none, that's what we'll do.
yeah. What I'll do is I'll place both books separately so that you can have any discussion. If there are any questions or any pieces of information or more context that board members would need, just alert me so that I can bring that to that next discussion. And again, I think it's just kind of expose some pieces of the puzzle that we can take up right away with our committees as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And also thank you again to the curriculum committee for a lot of heavy lifting on this.
Thanks.
All right, I believe that concludes our discussion items. We move to action. First action item, the 2024-2025 budget amendment, and Mr. Lenny Hansen, our Assistant Superintendent, will walk us through this item. Mr. Hansen, good evening.
Oh, just hold on. Lenny
Apologies.
told me that he was going to be really brief tonight. I just need to set my timer to see if he's going to deliver on that. Now, we're not going to count the time that you guys talk against him, but we did have some jokes before.
Take whatever time you need in order to
Thank you,
thoroughly
Mr.
present
Swigert,
it.
for your respectful
Absolutely.
introduction.
So many things riding on this.
Yeah, so budget amendment actually is a pretty straightforward topic that you see every summer, really, as we come to the end of the fiscal year. It's the standard topic that we bring forward. So you have a 16-page document in board docs. Looks similar to the preliminary budget and as well as a number of other tables you've seen before. So I'm just going to go through a brief summary about the budget amendment and answer any questions. So what is the purpose of a budget amendment? As I said, takes place annually each summer. What it really tries to do is align the most recently adopted version of the budget as closely as we can to where we believe end-of-year financials are going to end up. And the biggest benefit of that is it really puts us in a good position for a clean, orderly financial audit to close the year, which is what we are coming up on. So what will you see in today's budget amendment? So you'll see figures that for the most part represent what is final revenues and expenditures for the fiscal year that we just ended. There are still a few grant claims and a few small revenues that we're waiting on, a few final expenses, bills that are going to be still booked back to the end of June. But for the most part, you're going to see all end of year ins and outs within the district's books reflected. All wages are reflected in there as well. But again, we always say nothing is final till the auditor says it is, and it takes many months for the auditor to give that blessing. So, like I said, there's 16 pages of information. I'm going to give a very quick summary of a few revenue and expenditure highlights. Revenues were, for the most part, as expected. Special education reimbursement, something you've seen a lot in the news. We've talked about the podium before, did come up short. Based on what the state had initially promised. The state had promised a 33% reimbursement. It actually ended up just under 31%. You may think 2% isn't a lot, but it translates to $250,000 for the school district. So certainly impacts West Bend as well as other school districts. Due to some really great work by the Student Services Department and our comptroller office, we were able to enhance our ability to claim high-cost special education dollars, which is a very small component of the budget, but still any way that we can best utilize the resources available to us from the state is a good thing. And we're doing very well on our investments of district funds. So interest earnings or earnings on investments exceeded the original budget by 16%. So that's kind of some big rocks on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, we have our self-funded employee benefits, health and dental. Those expenses all came in within the budget. Our capital improvements that Mr. Harder brought forth, we did more than $2 million in annual capital improvements. That's totally separate from referendum projects. That's just maintaining what we've got, really showing the community that the assets that they have awarded to the district over the years, that we're taking good care of them by putting multiple millions of dollars into them. Our OPEB trust, the balance that we have in that trust, grew 13% from original budget to where we ended up, partially based on earnings, partially based on additional contribution we're able to make, which is great. That means we are paying down that liability sooner and faster than anticipated at the start of the budget year. And then something you've heard at this podium several times, there was across the state a lot of investment in literacy materials aligned with Act 20. The district on our end for elementary literacy materials invested almost $750,000 in that. The state did not provide reimbursement as it had promised. However, in the biennial budget that they just recently approved, they did indicate that now they will release those funds. So we are hoping in this fiscal year to receive not a substantial, but at least a small reimbursement partially for those expenses. So the next steps, this is a kind of a general calendar that you see every year of where we're heading. So you would adopt the amendment, which sets us up for that audit coming up in just a few weeks when the auditors will be on site. That then will lead us into the new budget year where we have our annual meeting taking place in late September. Then we receive final aid information from the state that allows us to finalize a budget before the board in October. And then the audit for the past year finally gets approved every year about 6 months after that year has ended, which comes forward to the board in January. So that's kind of what's ahead of us the next 5 months or so on the finance side. So I don't know how I did on my time, but it didn't feel too bad, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the amended budget.
Thank you. What questions, board members, do we have? Any questions?
Just a general question on the audit timing. Why does it take so long to get the report if it's conducted in August?
So, you and I have talked many times about the nuances of school finance. So DPI will also release reports that feed into that audit that they also take into account as they complete their process. So they've actually already been here. They were here in July for the pre-audit. The full audit, where they're on site for a week, is in August. They'll continue requesting additional documents for the subsequent couple of months. And then that is the typical timeline that it's completed, not just for us, but most school districts.
Okay, one of those school district things. In the private sector, it would be much more timely.
Yeah.
Well, as you said, you kind of do it and it's done as an event, and ours is just filtering info constantly for months.
Yep.
I would say that's not unusual for you guys, for school districts either, and municipal government. I mean, it's 6 months too, and it just sucks.
So there's a number of rules at DPI, or guidelines, I guess, not rules, that puts in place for auditors. Certain percentage of our budget they want audit every year, certain types of programs they want you to do, they want the auditor, not us, but the auditor to look at, okay, this many federal grants this year and this many of these types of programs. So the auditor has some leeway, but actually a lot of what they're required to do is driven by those guidelines from DPI. And that way, what they do is they make sure that over a multi-year period, they are looking at every program at some point. There isn't one that never gets that deeper look.
Other questions? Well, I'm not hearing any, and so I appreciate the questions. I'd move to approve the 2024-2025 budget amendment as presented. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Pickler. We have a motion and second to approve the 24-25 budget as presented. Any final discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Appreciate your work. We move then to future agenda items. We start with our board meeting calendar. So a number of dates here, of a number of meetings. All of these are scheduled to take place at the Education Service Center. Curriculum Committee meeting, August 5th, 4:30 p.m. Regular board meeting, August 11, 5:30 p.m. Policy Committee, August 19th, 4 p.m. Regular board meeting, August 25, 5:30 p.m. And Curriculum Committee meeting, September 2, 4:30 p.m. Again, we remind the public to look for the official postings as the time or date or location might change. Any questions on the board meeting calendar? Any additions? All right, hearing none, are there any items for follow-up and communication?
I'm taking away the follow-up items based on our book club discussion. We'll take that to both teams, both curriculum as well as policy, and then you'll see that on a future agenda item for the 2 titles. But overall, bring those topics forward so that you'll see those in committee.
Great, one other question. I know we continue to do some work on the use of the facilities, and I'm sure that work is ongoing. I don't know if that'll be ready for a future agenda, I'm sure.
Yep, you'll have that through policy committee. So we were kicking back. One of the pieces was refining kind of those groups and who they were. That'll come back to policy on August 19th. Recall that the board put in the savings effective July 1, so no one's getting a higher cost, but we just need to refine those groups. And you'll see that for the full board directly following policy meeting.
Great. Other questions, other items for follow-up and communication? Hearing none, we've reached the end of our planned agenda. So I would move to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
We'll give that one to Kelly. Motion and second to adjourn. Any final discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. Thank you to everyone who attended tonight. We look forward to seeing you at a future meeting.